Now we're talking about, we're going to go into the vitamins and the B complexes. And as we said earlier, the body is made up of oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbon. And hydrogen is the most important atom when it comes to the field of nutrition. When you realize that your body is producing 50 million cells per second, the frequency and the vibratory rate of hydrogen atoms is incredibly important, and most people don't understand that on the atomic level is where the thing has to be animated and nurtured and taken care of first, so that therefore the electricity has to flow, the electrical precursing fields have to flow, and then the nutritional energies have to flow. So we're kind of starting from the foundation by talking about nutrition in this series of shows that we're doing each week until we get into a deeper level of the body. One of the big things that we use in our vitamins, which is a color frequency of red, is vitamin A. Vitamin A is incredibly important. We use it in a palmitate form, and we use it in a beta-carotene form. And of course, there have been vitamin A scares. One of them was because they said there was a bad gelatin capsule which came from Japan. In fact, they did find one capsule that was bad. It had nothing to do with vitamin A scares. You'll find that any time you start taking nutrition and putting different vitamins in your body, that builds your frequency rate of your body up to the point where you either get rid of diseases or become immune to all diseases. The government doesn't seem to like this too much simply because you're interfering with the medical profession. When you interfere with the medical profession, you're interfering with a big hierarchy where the doctor writes a prescription and the drug companies fill it, and that's big business in this country. Matter of fact, the cancer industry alone is larger than the automotive industry, and about 1 out of 4 Americans have something to do with the automotive industry. So vitamin A is incredibly important. The reason we use so much vitamin A, we use about 40,000 international units a day of vitamin A in our formulas, because it builds the immune system up to such a high frequency level. We found that, for example, if you're subjected to the AIDS virus and your immune system is built up at a high frequency, any kind of disease coming in is always at an electronic level of some sort of frequency, and in the case of AIDS, it would be a lower frequency. So if your body's tuned up and your immune system is tuned up on a very high frequency level, chances are if you're one of these people who came in contact with the AIDS virus, it would probably pass harmlessly through your body and not cause you to come down with the disease or symptoms of the disease. And I can't emphasize enough right now in these times about keeping the immune system totally tuned up, because one of the big fears right now, and it's already started to happen, is the way that AIDS will be transmitted, not from saliva so much, not from contaminated blood so much, but from mosquito bites. And what the medical people are calling mosquitoes is a flying needle. And that's basically, we've already had a few cases of children come down with AIDS, probably because of mosquito bites from one victim to another. As the disease spreads into our society, as it will, and those people that are not taking care of themselves will become susceptible to it, you'll see more and more of the effect of insects in the disease of AIDS. When you take carotene into the body, it's immediately converted into vitamin A in the liver and the intestinal walls. And once it's absorbed, vitamin A is carried through the bloodstream to the cells, with any excess being stored in the liver until you actually need it. We also talked about vitamin D last week, and we said that it's very important to have, we use 400 international units of vitamin D in our formulas because it's very important to assimilate calcium. A lot of people have enough calcium in their bodies, but they're not getting the proper absorption of it because you can't absorb calcium without vitamin D. And when this happens, calcium is just passed through the body. Calcium, as you remember from last week, we talked about, is very important for the heartbeat. And if you don't have enough calcium in your body, your heart starts to have different kinds of weaknesses go up, circulatory problems, start getting cramping in your body. Normally, vitamin D comes from comes through the sunlight. 18 international units of vitamin D are absorbed in the skin in a normal sunny day, but with the changing of the frequency of the ozone layer and the ultraviolet content of the ozone layer coming up, it becomes necessary now for vitamin D to get it in a nutritional form. That's one of the reasons that we've been using it. Another nutrient that we use a lot of is one you might be somewhat familiar with. It's a newer one on the market called oxycosanol. Oxycosanol is used by athletes because what it does is it pumps large amounts of oxygen up into the muscles and we use about a little over a microgram of, or a milligram rather, of oxycosonol, whereas most people use only 90 micrograms or 100 micrograms. We use a full milligram. It's a very expensive item to put in the body, but if you're one of these people out there who's have to be jump-started in the morning, can't get your energy going, or you start falling asleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, oxycosonol is definitely an ingredient that's going to help you an awful lot. And the next area that we look at is the B complex. And there's been a lot of legislation around the B complex and a lot of noise from the FDA about it, because when you get into what are called the nitrillicides, B12 through B17, you get into an area when these are put into the body where cancer becomes a thing of the past, and now you're stepping on the toes of a major industry. What happens is, if you are low in the nitrillicides, then you're susceptible to what are called carcinogenic agents. Carcinogenic agents are things like sodium nitrite, MSG, all different types of foreign substances in the air, different types of cars coming through the air from nicotine, especially if you're a non-smoker, in the presence of a smoker, these kinds of things. And what cancer basically is the weakness of the first ray, or the red color, so it's a will-to-live disease. And when people start getting susceptible to it, the first thing that happens is you get a runaway situation in the body where estrogen is being manufactured and distributed through the body, which is a female hormone present in both males and females. And this estrogen then triggers a negative cell wall reaction, which creates a positive ion where a negative ion should be present in the cell, which then causes the body to start absorbing protein in the wrong areas, which leads to different kinds of blockages. And so what happens is, when you have the nitrillicides in your body, the nitrillicides keep plenty of free-flowing electrons, negative electrons, moving through the cell walls, and in your body will then pass out harmlessly the effects of sodium nitrate and all these different preservatives. We use B15, for example, one of the B complexes. We use large amounts of that in our vitamins, which is almost impossible to find in most nutritional formulas off the shelf. B15 was first isolated by Ernest Krebs Sr. several years ago and taken over to Russia. The Russians were very much into B15 because they found that anyone that had large amounts of B15 in their body was no longer susceptible to heart attacks because of the huge amounts of oxygen. Because heart attacks on one level are the lack of oxygen going through your cells, primarily the brain, and through the arteries. B17 comes from laetrile. We use it in the form of the acerola cherry, amongst other things, in herbal form. And B17 keeps the energies up so that when the cell is, for example, if you have a cancerous cell in the body and you subject it to B17, the B17 will attack that cell. Now, if you have a non-cancerous cell in your body, the B17 will just pass harmlessly through. One of the big scares that came out was, well, there's cyanide in that B17. Well, that's true, but the body will break the cyanide down into sugar in a normal cell that has rhodonase in it. But if a cancer cell is in your body, it doesn't have rhodonase, and that cell will be attacked by that cyanide and destroyed. So it's a healing, cleansing process that the body goes through. We also use large amounts of vitamin E and lecithin. And these are very important in formulations for several reasons. Number one, E is an antioxidant. And most people that are breathing carbon monoxide, which is every day, are very low in vitamin E. And as a result of that, other hormones in the chain, other proteins in the chain aren't going to be absorbed, and you're going to be lacking consciousness when you get down to the hormone level, coming from the nutritional level of the body. So it becomes very important to have large amounts of vitamin E in there. We use also PC lecithin with the vitamin E. And the reason we use the two together is because with PC lecithin, the absorption rate goes up hundreds of times the vitamin E, whereas if you just had vitamin E by itself. And then we amplify this even further by using selenium. When you use selenium with vitamin E, it amplifies the formula another 100 times. And when you start combining these different enzymes and coenzymes and nutrients together in formulation, what you end up with what's called synergistic formulation, which is probably one of the more advanced types of formulations that's coming to this world right now, and people are becoming aware of it. Just going down to the store and buying some off-the-counter nutritional program or some vitamin bottle assortment oftentimes doesn't do you any good and sometimes does you harm because a lot of these vitamins even have synthetic vitamins in them. And as I said earlier in my previous show, if you were to put a synthetic vitamin in your body, it doesn't have an aura field when photographed by beryllium photography or measured by different energy sources through radionics measurements. What happens is when you put something like that in your body, it steals from your body what's already present. So you end up becoming deficient in these different types of things. Last week and the week before, we talked about this being used by the food industry to help take away Americans' health. And one of these things that's big time is to promote heart risks. And heart risks, of course, will come when you start taking vitamin D and vitamin A out of your body. And this is done by assimilating the milk that you buy, which says vitamin A and D added, because these are synthetic vitamins that are added. So as a result, when they have these synthetic vitamins in them, and you drink this milk, what happens is it steals the nutrition from your body and causes problems. That's why a lot of people are becoming allergic to milk now that heretofore were not. Also, in the B complex, we use two types of niacin. We use niacin as a niacin form, and niacinamide as another form. Niacin is a very important nutrient in the body, because if you remember our chain that we talked about a couple weeks ago, the body is 5% minerals. The minerals then come through the enzyme process, the hydrogen atom. The enzymes then bring in the vitamins. And so as a result of having niacin is also called nicotinic acid. And a lot of times people start smoking. And if you're one of these smokers and you want to stop smoking, then what you want to do is start taking larger amounts of niacin so that the body will start getting nicotinic acid from the niacin rather than the nicotine. Because if you chemically look at the chemical composition of nicotine, you'll find that nicotine will be absorbed by your body and will produce an effect. I have a caller on the line, so we'll take that caller now.